Thank you for being here. It's the last talk before lunch. Yeah, and I'm a first-time speaker on the conference, so bear with me. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about building a front-end for your web application, and what I'm trying to do in this talk is just give an overview of the solutions. What can you do as the Python developer, how to show your data in the browser. What you need to know about me, apart from my name is Anastasia, is that half a year ago I tried to show my data on the front end, and I couldn't find the talk that would talk through the overview of the solution, so I created the talk myself now. And now I'm building time machine to go back. Let's talk about what is the problem I'm trying to solve here. The problem, you have the data that you want to show. It can be anything. It can be temperature in your house. It can be pollution levels in your city, or number of snacks you gave your dog today. How to get the data is not the part of what I'm going to talk about today. But I'm going to use the example from my own data. It's the number of steps that I did in February while I was preparing this talk, and the actual goal of the steps that my app tells me to walk every day. And apart from having the data that you want to show, you actually want to, you have the web service that you're using to provide this data, which means you're not interested in showing it in a terminal. Say you're tired and looking at your terminal, or you actually want to retrieve your data somewhere where you don't have access to terminal, and you want just to go to some web address and see your data. I'm using in this example Fast API. You're absolutely free to use any other web service that you're interested in, say Flask, Django. Yeah, and this is our initial conditions. So we have data that we want to show, and I'm going to be mostly talking about having data in the data frame. And we have the backend. This is a Fast API backend. So the first solution is just return your data. And what I'm going to do, what you're going to receive is just the JSON output in your browser. You can sort of see it. I find that if you need to resolve everything you do in 3 seconds, I think that's the best you can do. Just return it. But I find it's barely human readable. For me, it's almost impossible to compare days in this sort of representations. And I also think that in 5 seconds you can achieve more, because what we can do is we can use pandas. So pandas has a really nice option, which is called to HTML. And we can also use Fast API to help us. You return the HTML response, and you receive the table. Tables I find always better than the JSON, just because you finally can compare the row to each other. You can see how the values compare. I think the problem with this solution is that it sort of has this 90s look to this table. Design is all right. I mean, and when you're looking at this and being the Python developer, I think that the next question you have, OK, I have my data in a data frame. I think for me, intuitive next step that I would do is say, can we show the plot? And yes, we can show the plot. We can show the plot in the browser. It will be sort of step first 90s to 2000s. So we're going to make a matplot plot, and we're going to just return the image to the browser. So let's speak a little bit about this, because there are more steps happening than one line to HTML. So what's happening? We create the basic plot. This is abstracted away here. I suspect everyone, maybe better than I do, knows how to create the basic plot in Python. And what we are doing is we're creating the buffer object. So what I have here is a bytes.io. It's a file-like interface for in-memory binary data. And this is where we can store our plot. And while storing our plot, we're going to save to PNG. Of course, you're free to use spec if you like track more than PNG. And what we're going to do is we're going to just return it the buffer that we just created as the fast API response. And we're going to specify what our media type do we have. What is cool and what is happening here under the hood is that fast API will just read the media type that we provided and will set up all the required headers to our response. So the browser will not just look into our many bytes that it returned and try to interpret what is happening here. It will be already primed to saying, OK, this is a PNG image, and it will just read it, which I find great here is what you already get is that you have a plot, right? So from this data representation, you already see in which days I made especially a lot of steps, and you can already see where my goal was. So it's kind of this allows for better representation of the data without stepping out of the comfort zone of being in the Python. Problems is that what we return in this case, so what you see in the browser is just a PNG file. What the only interaction it allows is to save it. And that's pretty much it. You can't copy anything. You can't interact with this plot in any meaningful manner. And to have any sort of iteration, we will need to make at least one step outside of the comfort zone of being only in the Python. And we will sort of move a little bit back. We will return to having a table. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about having HTML and templates. And I find that with knowing a little bit of HTML, you can already achieve not 9, something nicer. And you can already get all the pros of having the plot where, for example, you can highlight the row with the maximum number of steps. It can be dynamic. It can change when the maximum or minimum value in your data frame has changed. And great stuff is that Fast API knows how to interact with their popular templating library. So it knows how to work with the Ginger, which is maybe familiar for some of you. And what it can do, it can dynamically fill our table. So how to create it is to write some HTML. I don't expect you to read the whole text on the slide. I just wanted to give you the feeling how the template looks like. So you write some HTML. If you have never written HTML in your life, first thing, it's very easy. It's not the programming language. It's a markup language. It's easy to learn. But if you don't want to learn it, I think that ChatGPT right now maybe writes better than anyone. So you write yourself, or you ask someone to write it for you. And then you fill it with the values of your data frame. So I have highlighted for you the dynamic part of the template, so you know what we're talking about, is that we're filling the table with the values from our data frame. And then we have some sort of logic to say, well, if this is the maximum value, then do this styling. And if you have the different value, then have a default styling. What I would say is that if you only need to show the data and show the table, that's probably the solution where the ratio of the cumbersome amount of things that you need to learn and the result is pretty nice one, and you probably maybe want to stay here. But what if you want to actually have more things? What if you want to have the calendar? What if you want your plots to appear and disappear? Then I would say what you need to do is you would need to jump into the world of the JavaScript. And in this talk, I will not be speaking about the JavaScript per se, because I think every Python developer actually can learn the JavaScript on themselves. Plus, I think there are so many tutorials about how to do this, and people who are much better educated than I do can educate you how to write JavaScript. But what I want to do is to provide the solution for you, so you have the plan how it would get from having the Python backend to having frontend written in JavaScript. And to do this, we will speak a little bit more about JavaScript frameworks. So the frameworks in JavaScript are libraries that allow for that allow for easier web development. And because they give you their opinions how to resolve the common problems and hide some of their complex logic. You probably heard of some of the JavaScript libraries. Their most popular one are Angular, Vue.js, React. I was creating this talk in Svelte, and you might ask why I did not choose React, for example. Well, I was naive. When I started working with the front end, I went to Stack Overflow and I saw what is the most loved framework, and it was Svelte. I thought most loved means easier, nicer. I will just pick one that will stay stable. Apparently, in 2 months, there was the new results of a new survey, and Svelte was not anymore the most loved framework. That's how I learned that actually front-end is very fast developing and fluid world. So what can I tell you though, that since then I have rewritten my pet projects from Svelte to React, so the logic that I'm going to talk about when talking about building a front-end will also work for other frameworks. So let's talk about this logic. So plan is pretty simple. It's 3 steps. You first write source code. That will be JavaScript and some Svelte. Then you compile. You don't compile. Svelte compiles things for you. You just click the button. It works for you. And then we return back to Python, and Python can serve the results of our compilation. So let's talk about these 3 steps a little bit more. So before writing the source code, we can use npm. npm, think of it as the pip for the JavaScript world. So it's a package manager. It can do a little bit more. It can also run the scripts for you. So what it can do is to not just install the Svelte for you, but also create the whole structure of the project for you. So you will get all configs for this. You will get the first pages for this. You get the correct folders for this. And once you get this, you just write the source code. I understand how it sounds when I say just write the code, but I just wanted to give you a little bit small of the feel how the code in Svelte looks like. So you start to see that there is some HTML here, there is some sort of, it starts to look like a template when you see there is the dynamic part of it. There are a lot of tutorials how to start writing in Svelte, so I think you can work it out, and I will go further and say you have written your code, and after that we will speak a little bit more about generating the static side. So there are 2 types of their website. There you can have the static website and you can have the dynamic one. The static one means that everyone who visits your page will see exactly the same content. And Svelte has the whole documentation how to do this. You basically change a couple configs, click the button, and Svelte compiles this for you. So from having your source code written in JavaScript and Svelte, you will get the folder, which will be called something like build. And in this build, you will get a bunch of files. And one of them will be called your page HTML. And many of them will be called CSS. This is one will be having your having all your design in. And there will be many JavaScript that you think you haven't written, but that's actually Svelte who took your JavaScript and optimized it so it's quicker, so no one can properly understand what's happening inside, which is nice because in web your code is available to everyone. And once we have this folder, we can return to safety finally. So we are back to Python. And what we do in Python is we first mount our folder, and so we tell to look for our front end. And the second what's happening, we will return every time someone asks for a front end, we will return the file response with the HTML file. Why it's important to mount the whole folder and not just return one HTML file is because when you will be loading, when the user will be loading your HTML file, this HTML file will also try to pick up all other files. So it will try to pick up your design files, try to pick up the JavaScript. So if you want to the whole website to fully work, you will need to mount the whole folder. And once you have done this, and once you will be able to serve stuff with Python, it's done. So you have your application running on the front end, and everyone can access it. That's pretty much it, what I wanted to tell you. So I say the things that I was talking about pretty much are, you can group them into three categories. One is staying in the pure Python where solutions are pretty simple, like just showing your data frame as the table or just sending your matplot libplot as bytes to the front end. If you just need the quicker solution, I find that's great. It's suboptimal if you want something interactive. We spoke a little bit about the HTML templating because it's also simple, but it's somewhat cumbersome. It's hard to write a lot of HTML not to lose the sense of it. And there is a JavaScript framework that we spoke about, which is powerful but requires some sort of time for setting it up, learning how to write. Thank you. What I forgot about to tell is that actually the source code for this talk is available with all the documentation on this QR codes leads to the Wrapup where the talk is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no actually question on Slido. If you have some, we have some time. Okay. Oh.
Hi, and thanks for the talk. Very interesting. I think I'm in a similar situation. I'm a Python developer. I use a lot of data. I don't like JavaScript. So I was like checking on HTMX. Like, I don't know if you have heard about it, like where you can, basically you can code everything in Python and then there is just a little shim. Like, if you didn't hear, maybe you don't have any opinion. Otherwise, I wanted to ask an opinion about that. But maybe you didn't check, so it's okay.
No, I actually haven't heard of HTMX. I generally find that if you can avoid like jumping into a new language, I think it's cool. Like if you can resolve your problem with just HTML, I think that then you don't really need the framework or JavaScript. That's great.
Yeah, I think I had a similar one. I used Streamlit a little bit, and there was a talk about Gradio, and these are also options if you want to set up a simple front end for prototypes. And I want to see, what your impression about using those tools with respect to JavaScript. So comparing JavaScript frameworks with Streamlit and Gradio that allow you to work in pure Python. So,
I used the Streamlit one. I think it's great. And I think the problem for me is where for example, in my case, I needed the calendar, and it didn't give me the calendar that I needed. What I say, like, if you still can have a minimal solution that requires minimal effort and resolves your problem, I don't see the reason. If you're just maybe curious, want to learn something, I think that's great. Like, I find that using JavaScript or JavaScript frameworks is a great way when you need something more which is not already available.
Hi, thanks for a great talk. I had a question. When you use these JavaScript frameworks like Svelte, what's like the deployment looking like? Are you like compiling on your computer then like shipping that, or are you building this on a container, or you just don't? That's fine also.
Yes, sir. I could be speaking about this from my personal project matters. So what I'm doing is I am compiling the front end. So that's pretty much like static files. And so they are part of the Docker volume in this way. Yeah.
Anyone? Okay, thank you very much for the talk.